Reading the Bible Together. I'm your host, Angela Smith. Today's conversation is going to be different than other conversations we've had before. But the other part of my job here at Faith Radio is that I am a producer with Susie Larson Live. And we had an opportunity to talk to Andrew Peterson and his son, Aedan Peterson, about a book that they just collaborated on called A Ranger's Guide to Glipwood Forest. And it's such a great conversation about writing, about creating art, and how we experience God in that process. And so you're going to hear Susie Larson, you're going to hear from Andrew and Aedan, and you're also going to hear from me in this conversation. We have a few copies of A Ranger's Guide to Glipwood Forest. If you'd like to enter the drawing for one of those copies, you can text the word book to 877-933-2484. And I'll tell you, when you go to fill out the form, you can just choose Susie Larson Live as the show and then just put A Ranger's Guide to Glipwood Forest in when it asks about the book. So let's head into the conversation with Andrew and Aedan Peterson.
Andrew Peterson is an award-winning singer, songwriter, and author of the Wing Feather Saga. He's also the founder of the Rabbit Room, an organization that fosters community through story, art, and music. Andrew and his wife, Jamie, have two sons, Aedan and Asher, and one daughter, Sky. What cool names. They live in Nashville, Tennessee, an area on a wooded hill in a little house they call the Warren, where they are generally safe from bumpy dig toads and toothy cows. I love that. Aedan Peterson is a professional illustrator and an animator in Nashville. He also is a member of the alternate rock band Wake Low, which has exactly 0 songs about squeebulins. I'm probably getting these names wrong. Welcome, Andrew. Aedan, so good to meet you. This is the one time I'll have you guys talk at the same time.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Good to have you. What has God been talking to you about these days?
Recently, my Bible study at our church, we've been going through James, and I feel like James is always a book that is incredibly convicting as far as how my own faith should play out, but at the same time, like, it reveals like the depths of grace and God's grace and how he chooses to give that to us. So that has been very good in the last couple of weeks.
Beautiful. Wow. Thank you. And Andrew, how about you?
Man, I knew Aiden's answer was going to be better than mine. It's so funny. Yeah, I have when I was thinking about this question ahead of time, I was remembering the last 5 years of my life, and some things that I have begun to just think of as a matter of course are things that really in the story of my walk with Christ are relatively new. And I would say it was the fact that I wrote a book a couple years ago called The God of the Garden about the way the Lord has made his presence known to me through his creation. And I have begun reading scripture, paying close attention to the moments where Jesus uses agricultural metaphors, where whether it's the parables that he uses or the fig tree that he cursed. I listened to this wonderful podcast from the Bible Project about trees in the Bible, and I'm currently reading Job, and I just read a verse this morning where he was describing when a tree is cut down, there's still hope that a shoot will come up out of the tree. And I was thinking about like how wonderful it is that all of creation is just kind of brimming with all these little sermons that get preached all the time. So that's what's been ringing my bells lately is reading the whole of Scripture through the lens of the way creation is making his presence known and his truth known.
Really, all creation speaks of his glory. It's amazing. You get really close up to a butterfly, or you ponder the idea of a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, or that a baby can be formed in a mother's womb. And I mean, everywhere you turn, if you're looking for it, you see the miracle handiwork of God. And I think sometimes we move so fast we miss it. But creatives like you seem to notice the nooks and crannies and nuances of life, which I think is just amazing. Andrew, I would love to know from you how the Wing Feather Saga was first born in your heart.
It was the joke answer is I was just trying to make my kids think I was cool.
Not a bad motivation.
Yeah. Aedan and Asher and Sky were probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 when I started writing the story in earnest, and I think that I wanted to be an author for as long as I can remember. But the inciting incident that really made me decide I had to write the book was reading the Narnia books to the boys when they were little. And I had this, I remembered how much I loved those stories when I was a kid, and B, I experienced the great joy of getting to go on that journey with my kids, and I was like, I've just got to know what it's like to make a story up. And not to downplay the fact that there are themes that show up in these books that I think are helpful and healthy and hopefully edifying. But I really just wanted to tell the best story I could tell, and I knew I was doing it right if I would read the next chunk of the book to the kids as I was writing it, and they were dying to know what happened next. So
Excellent. That's
so
awesome.
just keeping the kids' attention, and they're keeping the pages turning was my real, in some ways, my main goal, because I trusted that the story was going to do its own work on them.
For the sake of those who've not heard of the Winged Feather Saga or don't know what it's about, give us an overview, Andrew, of what they're about.
Okay, so Aedan, have you ever had to answer this question?
Not really, no.
It's such a hard question to answer. I when we were working on the animated series with Angel Studios, the other team, the production team, spent a lot of time trying to distill the stories down and figure out a way to talk about them. And I realized that I was kind of useless in that conversation because it's like I'm standing too close to the painting to be able to really sum it up. So it is a story about a family, and it's a family that is up against a great darkness, and they have to join together to survive, and not just survive, but maybe even save the world.
Wow. Aedan, what do you remember about the stories when your dad started to read them to you?
I have great memories as a kid, laying on the couch every night almost, getting to hear like a new chapter as they were being written. So it was like hot off the press. But I remember just loving it and watching my dad, draw the maps or whatever at breakfast. I had a bowl of cereal and just was watching him draw creatures or maps, or just be making things and be making this world, which I think has is probably one of the biggest factors to what I ended up doing. I mean, I'm still, the fact that I get to, help make those worlds come to life and get to be a part of like the story making process is just really fun to me. And it's something that I grew up getting to watch happen, and now I get to do it.
So how did you come into the picture, Aedan? Like, when did your dad first discover that you had a talent for illustration?
I've been drawing since I was 10, pretty seriously. I knew pretty early on that drawing was a thing that I wanted to do, and I wanted to be an illustrator in the future. I was sketching all the time, and I was way into just fantasy, nerdy stuff. So when it came time to do the Creaturepedia, which is going to be a companion book to the series that contains some of the fantasy creatures from the world, Pops gave me the chance to do that book and illustrate all the creatures, because that's what I was doing anyway.
And you were 16.
So wow. I was bringing him drawings of weird creatures before it became official that I would be illustrating the book, and then eventually it kind of fell into that.
So he was stirring your creativity by, painting pictures with words, and so then you started to paint words with pictures. I mean, that's really amazing. Andrew, say a word, if you would, about this new one, A Ranger's Guide to Glipwood Forest.
It was it's possibly the most fun I've ever had writing a book, partly because there wasn't this huge pressure to write, a gigantic, epic, sweeping story. The Winged Feather Saga is 4 books, and it tells the big story. But it's been fun to do these companion books, little ancillary, fun side books, that help to build the world, and so this was one that it was actually the publisher's idea. They were like, "Hey, what about doing another Creaturepedia type book?" And so, because I really love walking footpaths in England, I don't know if you know or have ever had the privilege to get to go do it, but it's this fascinating thing where there are these trails that just wind through the countryside in England, not like national parks like we have. It's just, you're literally walking through farmers' fields and climbing their fences and, crossing the countryside. And I love it. And they often come with these guidebooks that tell you, oh, on your left, you're going to see an Iron Age fort, the ruins of this thing. Or on your right, there's a castle that was built in 1482 or whatever. And so I thought, ooh, wouldn't it be fun to write a guide to the scary forest in this world, in the same spirit as one of these British footpath guides. And so
Wow.
it was just a blast to write a step-by-step journey through the forest. And then Aedan, of course, illustrated it with like a zillion spot illustrations of cool flora and fauna that are in the world, and different landmarks, and character sketches and stuff. So it was just a total joy to get to do this with him.
Well, I've got one more question. This one is for Andrew. And in fact, Aedan, if you have answers you want to chime in, please do so. But I'd love for you to talk, Andrew, about how the series has impacted your readers. Like, what kind of things have you heard from them as they've walked their way through the Wing Feather Saga?
Man, it's been a huge blessing. Partly because the books have been out long enough now to where I'm meeting grown-ups who read them as kids, I guess the first book came out in 2008. So if you were, 12 years old when that happened, you may have kids of your own at this point, and so I'm getting to hear stories from people about what the books meant to them when they were young. And there's two parts of it. One part is, I just am so honored that anybody with, the bajillion books that exist in the world, that they would spend time with mine, that they would, their imaginations would be ignited, and that they would feel that, I'm always kind of chasing that flutter in the stomach that I remember having when I was a kid and I was watching a really great movie or reading a really great book. And, ultimately what I'm hoping, in some ways, is to wake up longing in people. In C.S. Lewis's book, Surprised by Joy, he talks about this intense longing that he experienced from time to time. And looking back, he realizes that those stabs of joy were like breadcrumbs that led him to Christ. And so it's one of the wonderful things about art is that you don't get to be in charge of what happens after you've made the art. All you get to be in charge of is being obedient to the work that God's called you to, and then he's in charge of the results. And so as an author, I have high hopes for what this story might do for people. But all I can really do is try to steward well this time and this whatever gifting he's given me. And so that means that I get to be pleasantly surprised when I meet a young reader who says, I stayed up till 4 a.m. to read the book, or letters from parents that say that the stories gave their kids a way to process grief, or death, or point them to the hope of the resurrection, or help them understand how good family is, whatever it may be. So there's a whole breadth of wonderful responses that I've heard from people, which is a great honor.
Yeah, it really is a great honor. I mean, we won't get to see, the full harvest of our offerings until we see Jesus, but it's so kind of him to let us get glimpses of it now and then. Encourages your heart so much. Aedan, anything you want to chime in about that?
Yeah, along the same lines, it has been very delightful for me anytime I get to see a kid who has drawn a creature of their own or engaged with the world in that way and has been inspired by the Creaturepedia or anything in the Wing Feather universe, and then has gone and made something on their own. And I know that as a kid, I was always so fantasy stuff actually ended up pointing me more towards like the world and creation. And I think good and beautiful art tends to point the viewer towards reality and towards creation, and helps the readers to like engage even closer with creation. Anytime I get to see a sketch or a drawing that a kid has done is just really cool to see.
I'm going to hand it to Angie now.
Well, I'm going to add to those list of parents that thank you for the work that you've done. I have a son that's a freshman in college this year, and one of the times he came home, he took Wing Feather Saga with him back to school because he was talking about, a friend asked, what's your favorite book series? And he said, oh, it's Wing Feather Saga, and the friend hadn't heard of it, and so then he wanted to bring those books in. But to what you were saying, Aedan, he also loved fantasy novels. He also loved the other worlds. And, I have a couple of questions. The first one I'll ask is, when you're creating those worlds, how do you keep all the details straight? I mean, how do you remember who's who? And
yeah. Well, it helps if you have really smart kids that you're reading the story to. Really, because Aedan, I don't know if you remember this, but there were times when I would get facts wrong, or you would kind of have a question, and after I would read a portion of the story, the kids would notice consistency issues, or I'm trying to think of a good example. I mean, this wasn't the kids that pointed it out, but I remember one of my editors, noticed that Poto, the grandpa in the story, had a sword when, like, 3 chapters earlier, he had thrown his sword at a creature and lost it. And, so I had to go back and write that he had 2 swords. And so that was the easiest solution. But no, kids, I think, are better readers than adults are a lot of times. Like, they are really eager to step into the story. There's less of a threshold for them to dive in and exercise their imagination or apply their imagination to the story, and they take it very seriously. And so, honestly, yeah, knowing that there are going to be kids out there reading the stories forces you to be careful, to kind of tread lightly and make sure that you're getting all your facts straight. And I think that's my answer. That's part of it. Editors are the greatest thing in the world too.
Amen.
Do you have anything to add to that, Aedan? Being a fact checker?
Yeah. No, I don't have anything to add.
When I was asking my son, and then a coworker that had also read the series, my coworker Nat said he described it as a delightful series, but with also lots of tension and dark and light. And I've noticed, in your music and in your art, there's, this balance of dark and light. And how do you hold the tension while you're creating it?
This may be a weird answer, but I was just thinking about the fact that Aedan is an amazing visual artist, and he's kind of become my tutor in some ways when it comes to art, because I like to draw too, and have been an amateur for as long as I can remember. I actually remember sitting Aedan down when he was little and showing him some of my drawings from high school, and kind of saying, "Oh, I can help you draw," and whatever. And within about a week, he was better than I was. And so I'm still a little bit mad about that, honestly, Aedan. But one of the things that Aedan has taught me is about values. And I don't mean like moral values. I mean values in art, like the light and the dark, and how important it is that the value is more important than color. That the balance of light and dark in a picture is crucial to the beauty of the picture. And so, that to me might work as a metaphor for how that works in stories too. That there are some stories that are so heavily dark that they don't work, and then some stories that are so heavily light and happy that they don't work. That if you paint your shadows well, it makes the light more beautiful. Does that make sense? And so when it comes to the art that moved me the most as a young man, a young Christian, and the music that I love the most, it's art that acknowledges the brokenness of the world, that acknowledges the reality of evil and sin. And I want to be clear, not just the fact that the world out there is a broken place, but the world inside of us is also a broken place sometimes. And if the person making the art seems to acknowledge that truth, then I'm ready to listen. Does that make sense? I trust them when they tell me, guess what? Yes, there is darkness, but there is a light that is stronger. My heart is willing to believe that bright, beautiful truth a little easier, because the person didn't make a straw man out of the brokenness of the world. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. We've been having conversations recently about how that it seems like the message that's needed is, or at least the way to share the message of Christ isn't necessarily is to say you're broken, but we all have brokenness, but Jesus is the healer. He can take care of that brokenness. But you have to be honest with your own brokenness first. and lead with,
Yeah.
like me leading with my brokenness kind of makes a safe space for somebody else to share their brokenness. And then like God can work in that situation. So what I'm hearing you say is like the way that people might interact with whatever kind of art, that is creating that safe space for them to be honest with their own brokenness. Am I understanding you right?
I think so. Here's an example that I think of is in the hymn, "Prone to Wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love."
Mm-hmm.
I'm blanking on the name of
Come
that
Thou
hymn
Font.
right now. Come Thou,
It's my favorite.
Come Thou Font. It's I love that you said font and not fount. Wow, old school. But yeah, like everybody's, like I sense that the whole room sings that verse with a little more emotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
When you get to that hymn, so many hymns aren't willing to admit, "Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love." And there's something to me that gets at the real heart of the thing in that moment, in that hymn, because it's followed up with real bright hope and goodness. So I think that's what I'm getting at, is that I was trying to write the Wingfather saga in a way that would comfort a kid that was afraid of the darkness by showing that, by admitting that yes, the darkness is real, but that there's something stronger.
That's so good. Aedan, do you have anything to add to that? Especially, what Andrew said that you had taught him about, in art, the importance of light and dark in art.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say, like, from the perspective of like my childhood, and I think kids are smart readers and smart viewers. As like, if I was watching a show when I was a kid, the moment that I realized that there weren't real stakes, that nobody was in like real danger, that was the moment that I checked out. And just because kids are aware that the world is broken, and so if there's a sense that there isn't real danger in the story, then it doesn't feel true, because the truth is that there's real danger, but the greater truth is that, like what Pops was saying, is that there's like a greater hope than the danger.
Mm-hmm.
So I just remember that being a very important thing when I was a kid, that the stories that I read actually had that sense of stakes. And I think that that's just better storytelling, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I also think it helps, as a parent, then to be able to have conversations with your children. So like my boys like fantasy novels. And so they were reading, things about mythology, and to be able to then have a conversation with them about, like that's who Paul is talking about when he's preaching in Rome, and to be able to have, bigger conversations. And especially when something's well written and it's engaging and it's honest, then you can engage in real honest conversation with your kids too. Yeah. So good. So what I'm curious about, you mentioned before the animated series that's being made out of the Wingfeather saga. What was that like, Andrew, to have a story that you created that lived in your head, that had some illustrations, but to now see it moving on a screen? What was that process like for you?
It is the coolest thing you can imagine. It's wonderful. Like it would be maybe the worst thing you can imagine if it wasn't a good adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the team it is amazing. I mean, the whole story, it's been a 6-year journey. More than that now. I guess we're in 7 years since the series was complete. And I was friends with Chris Wall, who I knew through doing some work with VeggieTales, and I was like, and he was a fan of the books, and I was like, hey, what do you think about maybe turning this into an animated series? And it took him a while, and he finally decided to dive headfirst into trying to find partners to make that work. And it took so long. I mean, we were, flying out to Hollywood and meeting with Netflix and Amazon Prime and these different companies, and just kept feeling either we didn't feel good about it, or it was just a shut door. Until we finally met these Angel Studios people in 2020 who read the books and then said, hey, how can we help you make the show that you want to make? And so that led to 10,000 fans of the books invested in it, and to help us make season 1 and part of season 2. And so that meant that all of a sudden we've got this, they have entrusted us with the means to make this thing happen. And then Chris began building an incredible team of animators and background artists and storytellers. We had people come over from Pixar and people who used to be at Disney, and all of these amazing, veterans in the industry stepped in to help tell this story. And so the nice thing about it is that, like, I get to be in the room for, the conversation. I speak into the scripts, and just an hour ago, I was looking at a character design that Aedan actually made for one of the characters in season 3, and making notes on it and changes that I think ought to happen. So I get to be involved in the process. So what ended up being on screen was something that I got to be part of every step of the way. And I'm so happy with it. I just think it's marvelous.
Well, and what a great question for the studio to ask. How can we help you make the show that you want to make and still give you still have a hand in it and still have, some control and ownership of it?
Exactly. Yeah. And we feel very responsible to not just the investors, but the fans of the story in general. I mean, there's a lot of people out there like your son who grew up with these stories, and we want to make something that will be exciting to the kids who read the story, growing up too.
So good. And so people can watch that at angel.com. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you also have Behold the Lamb tour coming up in December.
I do. This is the 24th annual Behold the Lamb tour.
Wow.
Which is crazy. And Aedan, you just turned 25, which means that since Aedan was 1 year old, every December, this tour has been a part of the Peterson family life. And so, yeah, we're getting ready to go out and do it again. I can't wait.
That's amazing. But I think we're getting ready to wrap, but is there anything that we haven't asked you about the book that you want to make sure that we talk about, or that you share about the book or the process or the Wing Feather Saga?
Well, I'll just say, Aedan, I don't know what you want to say, but I just would say that, like, getting to share this part of my career with my children, and to do so in a way that is like, I'm unabashedly a fan of Aedan Peterson and the work that he does. I was just telling somebody that if I didn't know who Aedan was, I would be stalking him on Instagram and liking his posts. I would be. It's just like, and the same is true. My other son, Asher, is a record producer, and he makes amazing music. Sky Peterson, my daughter, is a singer-songwriter, and she's writing great songs. So I just feel like, in some ways, the luckiest dad in the world, that I don't have to fake it. That I don't have to pretend like I like what they're doing and say, well, that's really neat, Aedan. I can genuinely say he's one of my favorite illustrators in the world, and to get to partner with one of my favorite illustrators in the world on this book is a great joy.
I would second all of that. It's just like the full circleness of or just getting to, like, grow up hearing the books as they're written, and then graduate college, and then suddenly just get to work on the show and still make stuff with my family, like with Pops. And then my wife is a background artist on the Wing Feather show as well. So it has just been like a great joy to work on something that I genuinely love working on with my friends and with my family. And it's just a blast.
It's so great. I would say too, one of the things that I love is that our kids all got to grow up in a community of artists who, whether they were songwriters or visual artists or poets or authors, whatever, but who were also Christians. So they got to grow up and see, oh, this is also a part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, is that we make beautiful things, and we tell stories, and we write poems, and all of these things. Like, there's a seat at the table in the kingdom of God for the fantasy artist and for the poet and for the preacher. You know what I mean? And I don't know that I understood that as a boy. And so I'm so delighted that here in our community that our kids have gotten to not just make beautiful art, but also bump into their favorite musicians in the line to go receive communion at church on Sunday. It's a really remarkable thing. And I think that's part of what, it's like the church was the garden that our kids grew up in, and to see the fruit that has come in the work that they're doing is the best thing I can imagine as a dad.
Wow, the mutual honor that you have for each other and the way you both honor God is such a beautiful thing. Thank you for sharing your hearts, your story, and even your art with us, Aedan and Andrew Peterson. God bless you, and may he continue to bless the work of your hands in the days ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that so fun to hear father and son? And I love that Aedan kept calling Andrew Pops during the conversation. So good. And I love the way that they draw us into creating, that, draw us into being creative and experiencing God there. Here at Reading the Bible Together, we talk a lot about reading the Bible because that is important. And while we do that, we can experience God, or we can take the knowledge that we've learned from reading the Bible into our life and experience God throughout the day. When I go, there are places in Minnesota up on the North Shore along the shore of Lake Superior is one of the places that I experience God. It's the beauty of it, and it's big, and there are waves crashing in it. I feel closer to God in that beautiful creation space. And so I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. It sure was a privilege to be able to talk to them. So thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done that already, because next week we are starting our series on Advent.
On the latest episode of the Wild God Stories podcast, we go to Africa.
I was raised in Sierra Leone in a community that truly lived the phrase, "It takes a village."
Until one day, the world outside Anita's village broke in.
I didn't grow up in a war zone, but I watched one unfold in the country I love.
God brought hope to her story and many others through radical provision.
God began to direct us towards Uganda, Africa.
I was born and grew up in the countryside of Ethiopia.
Nanj and I met in Kigali, Rwanda.
Discover how God showed up in the middle of war, loss, and impossible odds in Africa. Stories that'll make you say,
"Wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God."
Wow, God Stories. Wherever you get your podcasts.